Okay, we're on Gimel base 43b. Last line. Amar Yitzchak, Amar Yechanan. Yitzchak says in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. So this is sort of a sidetrack. There were a number of statements from Rabbi Yitzchak in the name of Rabbi Yechanan that were relating to going out to war, and now we got a little sidetracked. So we're now on top of 44a. Meis Taifis Arba Amas L'Tumo. Yeah, there's the rabbis declare that tuma exists even without touching, just by being within 4 amas of a dead body you become tummy. And the reason is because they didn't want people that were keeping a high level of tara to be next to dead bodies, as you might expect. Okay, the Tana Tuna, and we find in the Brisa, Chotzer Hakever, if you have the courtyard around the grave. So like we spoke about in the past, the way they would bury people in ancient times was through these catacombs. So there was a room that they would build, and all the walls would be lined with catacombs, and then there'd be an adjacent room that enters the room with the catacombs. So the adjacent room is tar, according to Beishamai, as long as there's 4 amas in it. Beisil, I remember, Beisil says arba tfachim, 4 tfachim. B'medvarim, what are we talking about? Shepischa milmalo, where the room is entered from above. Aval pischa min atzad, but if the room is entered sideways, you don't need a ladder to get into it. Divrei kol arba amas. Then everyone agrees that it has to be at least 4 amas big. 1 second. Okay, and the reason for this is because since it's a separate room, it's not the room that has the catacombs in it; it's the adjacent room. So therefore, it's clearly demarcated as a separate area. I think what we're saying, it depends basically if the entrance is from the side or from above. So Gemara says adrab, to the contrary, minat sad. If the entrance is from the side, so then. Mididiv enofik. 1 second. Yeah, so the idea is sort of when you leave this room, you can just walk out if the entrance is from the sides. However, milmala, if the entrance is above, you have to climb out the ladder, or pull yourself out. It's not possible for you not to very likely cover, make an oil over the grave. So Gemara says you're right. El medvarim murim shepiskam and etzal piskam milmala arba amas. The Gemara says you're right. If the exit is sideways, then there's a debate how large the antechamber has to be. If it has to be 4 tvachim or 4 amas. 4 tvachim, by the way, is sort of it's so small it could barely hold a person. For example, the smallest size sukkah that's kosher is 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim, and it's sort of the minimum size that a person can sleep in. This talking about is even less than that. Okay, now, if the entrance is from above, if the entrance is on the side, even if it's very small, if the entrance is from above, so then we require it to be larger because we presume that while he lifts himself out of the pit or out of the room, then he will he may make an oil. He might stick his hand above the grave sites. Or Memdal Aleph. I'll be at the first set of 2 dots in a moment.
I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll be there in a moment. And this is only true with regard to the room that's next to a gravesite, since there's clearly two rooms. There's the rooms with the gravesite, the catacombs in it, and there's the adjacent room. Therefore, we say the adjacent room is tahar, provided that it meets these criteria. However, but if you have just a dead body, so then we say that anyone who's within 4 amas of the mace becomes tamei.
Things like those measurements of 4 amas. It's rabbinical as opposed to biblical, or?
Yeah. So, well, the whole idea of the fact that being in 4 amas of a dead person makes tamei is a rabbinical concept. Biblically, you need to do a few things: either touching, moving, or oil. I mean, maga, heset, or oil. Okay. So now we're at Mia Isha Asher Eros Isha, about a man who got married and wants to get wants to be exempted from military service. Tana Rabbanon Asher Eros, someone who marries who's engaged, who's done an erusin with a woman. Echad ha'ma'aris ve'esabsula ve'echad ha'ma'aris salmona, whether or not this was the first marriage or not. Ve'echad shemeres yavam, or whether they're waiting for yibam. Bafilu chamisha achen, even if you have 5 brothers, who makes echad mehem b'milchama, and one of them dies in battle. Kulon chayzrim, they all go back. Asher eras isha v'loy lekocha is the next word. Now, it could have said loy lokach, he didn't take. What's loy lekocha, the plural? Prat la'almona l'kain, gon l'gurush v'chalutza l'kain, had Mzeres and Sin Yisrael, Bat Yisrael, Mam Shal Anasin. A forbidden marriage. So Gemara says, hold on, if it's forbidden, Lema D'Lek Rabbi Yisrael Lili. Let's say this is not like the opinion of Rabbi Yisrael Lili. The Rabbi Yisrael Lili ha'amra yarav v'rachal of Zem Se'ar Mevarisha B'Yadai. We'll see this Rabbi Yisrael Lili in a moment when we get to the Mishnah. But Rabbi Yisrael Lili says anyone who's concerned about any sins that he's committed is exempt from military service. So obviously these people are clearly sinners. The Gemara says, "I feel time Rabbi Yisrael Lili." It could even be the opinion of Rabbi Yisrael Lili. The Amarava says, the prohibition is only to be is an intimate encounter. In other words, getting married to a forbidden relationship is not forbidden. It's only an intimate encounter that's forbidden. So these people have not yet sinned. Why should a kohen not marry a divorcee? Mishum lo'echal, so that his children don't become chalalim. And now, how would his children become chalalim? Until there's a sexual encounter, he would not get malchus because it's impossible for him to make his children into chalalim. It's only once that encounter exists that's when he violates the prohibition. The rabbis taught asher bono, asher nota, asher eros. Okay, so when the Torah lists the exemption, first it says he who builds a house, he who plants a vineyard, and he who gets married. What's the message here? Linda Torah derech. Torah is teaching you the proper way to live. We do this all the opposite order. Okay, what's the proper way to do it? Sheyivna adam bayis. The first thing is a person should buy a house, and then vita kerem should figure out how to make money. And then he should get married. Shlomo himself gave this advice, the following verse. Prepare outside your labor. So Gemara explains, what does this mean? Prepare your stuff on the outside. Zebayis. First thing a person should do is buy a house. And then you should work in the field. Zekarim, that's a business. Afterwards, you should build a house. Zuisha, that's a wife, effectively a family. Okay. The Gemara has another 2 explanations to this verse. Davar achar, which is a similar theme. Davar achar, prepare the basic stuff. Zeh mikra, that's reading the verses of the Torah. Ve'atda b'sadaloch ze Mishnah. Then you should learn Mishnah. Achar b'nisa b'secha ze Gemara. You should learn Gemara afterwards. Davar achar, another explanation is hacham mechutz melachtecha ze mikra u Mishnah. The first step is reading the psukim and then learning the Mishnah. Ve'atda b'sadaloch ze Gemara. Then afterwards you learn Gemara. Achar b'nisa b'secha. The final step is elu ma'asim tovim that is using the Torah to perform good deeds. Second. Yeah. Prepare your work on the outside. Mikra Mishnah Gemara. That's basic, reading Torah, learning Mishnah, understanding Gemara. And then you sort of establish yourself in the field. That's good deeds. And afterwards you build a house. Then Droish probably means here that you're able to teach and accept and receive rewards. Okay, these are the people that don't go back from the military conscription. Somebody who builds a base sha'ar, someone who builds a guardhouse. Tana imhaisa v'dimus echad chayzer. Okay, so the opinion of Rabbi Yehudah was somebody who rebuilds his house on the same foundations does not go back. The Gemara says if he's haisa v'dimus echad means he makes a small extension, or he makes the house a little bigger. So it's not precisely on the first foundation. So then chayzer he's exempt from service. If he builds a house of bricks of cement in Sharon, he would not go back. Tana, we learned why because it's the area cannot hold stone houses and they sink into the ground, and it needs to be refurbished twice every 7 years. Okay, these are the people that don't move. People that have begun to enjoy their first year of benefit in these things. A new wife, a new wife. And how do you know a woman who's previously married is included? Talmud Leimer, Isha Mikolmakim. Any type of woman. If Isha is an expansive category, it includes all women, even women that have been previously married. So what does Chadasha mean? So Gemara says, the marriage is a new marriage. The exclusion here is a woman who was previously married to the same man and divorced. If they get remarried, then he would not be exempt from battle because the marriage is not a new marriage. He doesn't go out to combat. I would think that he could participate in logistics by building the roads and providing food and drink for the combat units. Talmud Leimer, all of the kol dover. For any reason, he shouldn't commit to the battle. I would think to include. One second. Someone who built a house but has not yet has not lived in the house yet, or not the Kerem. He planted a vineyard but didn't yet have the 4th year of product, right? So when you plant a fruit tree, the first 3 years you can't eat from it. So he didn't have the 4th year yet. Eres Isha he got engaged but didn't get married. Talmud Leimer Olaf. So in other words, people that have begun enjoying the benefits of their work. In other words, they just got married, they just started eating the fruits of their vineyard, they just started living in the house. So they're exempt. Lo yaver. They're not even summoned to the conscription area. However, but other people do get called up, and those are people that have built the house or the vineyard but did not yet start using it, or a man who got engaged but did not get married. So the Gemara says, once the Torah says they shouldn't go to battle, so why does Torah need to say in other words, they don't even go to the collection point. So certainly, if they don't go to the collection point, they don't go they don't go to combat. So Gemara says, to violate two prohibitions. In other words, there are two prohibitions in conscripting a newly married man. One prohibition that you even called him up in the first place, you asked him to participate in selective service, and the second thing that you actually conscripted him. Okay, mission. We together? Okay, mission. Next, this is the big one. Okay, so we basically started off, there's three parts to the battlefield talk, right? We said the Kohen is the first one, he says the first thing, and that is, don't be scared, basically, right? You might want to say the modern version of that, they call the pep talk. Then step two is to eliminate the bona fide exceptions. So these would be people who built a house, planted a vineyard, were engaged or married. Either they're not even summoned, or they're summoned and they're sent to logistics. And then the third part is all those that are weak. The Shadrim continue to speak to the nation. Okay, and what do they say? They say Hayori V'rach Alevav, those that are scared, V'rach Alevav, and their hearts are soft. They are sent home. Why are they sent home? 1 second. So the Torah gives a reason. It says, "V'layimas es lavav echav kilvavai." He shouldn't melt or disgust the heart of his brothers like his heart. So in other words, we're afraid that if we draft a chicken, the whole unit will become chickens. Okay, we're not talking about any trans chicken identity here. We're talking about just the euphemistic chicken.
Doesn't be accused of being foul.
Yeah. It's whenever I see someone who's joined the American military, I try to go out of my way to thank them and honor them. So very often they'll ask me, "So have you joined the military?" And I usually say, "No, I haven't." They say, "Why not?" I tell them I'm a chicken. Anyway, okay. The Shadrim continue to speak to the people. So they tell them all the people whose hearts are weak. Rabbi Kiva says, those that are scared and weak and have a weak heart, this is somebody who's scared of the sins that are in his hands. I'm sorry, skip the line here. I'm sorry, go back. Again, Rabbi Kiva, it means like you might expect it to mean, a guy who literally cannot handle the stress of battle. The lira is karav shlufa, or to see corpses dead strewn out everywhere. Rabbi Yosei Lili says, the person with the weak heart is the person who is scared of the sins that are in his hands. Someone, in other words, a sinner. So this is in general, this is a good. You have to single people out. You group them in with people that are legitimately excluded. So the Torah says the Shadr gets up and says, all these people that have exceptions, you're all welcome to leave. But they don't yet leave. They say, wait till the end, then you can leave. And then the end is, and anyone who's a sinner can leave too. So the sinners are leaving with the people that are legitimately excused. So therefore, it's not as embarrassing for them. Mm-hmm. Nobody thinks you're leaving for a sinner. They think you left because you planted a tree or something like that. Okay. Rabbi Yossi, again, that was the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says, a forbidden relationship. Any forbidden relationship would be an example of somebody who is scared and his heart is weak. Okay, what's the difference between Rabbi Yossi and basically they're both categories of sins? The Gemara will explain. Okay, done. So now we're ready to go to battle. So how do we go to battle? Now that they finished talking, all the exemptions have been handed out. So they appoint generals. So what they did was they appointed these mighty men to lead them in battle. So these were strong men of both physical strength and strength of character, that they should be on the front lines and not be scared and not turn around. So that would make sense, Barosham in the front, and also Ubakeva Shalom, also along the rear lines. Mamidan Zakifan, Lifneam Vacherem Meuchureim. They would point strong men in the front, and also people in the back. And the people in the back lines, the back of the front lines, Shilin Shalbaras Lavidem. They'd have these iron spears. Did they translate Shilin? Rods. They call them Mivakish Lachsar. And anyone who thought that they would retreat without an order, so Harshus Biyadar Lekapechas Shaikav, they'd be allowed to cut his chops off. It's quite literally what it means. But they'd have the permission to kill him. Why is that? Chetchilas Nisa Nefila. So we'll explain this in the Gemara. The Gemara, the word tchila here, tchila typically means beginning, but over here it means the cause. So it would mean the cause of running away is death. Now, actually, the Gemara rearranges the Gersa and explains it's the opposite. Very often, retreat causes catastrophe, and therefore they would not allow retreat unless an order was given. And anyone who thought that they would retreat on their own, they would, possibly be killed, executed. Shenemar, the verse states, and over here you'll see it very clearly. Nos Yisrael of Pelishtim. The Jewish people retreated from the Pelishtim. And many of them were killed. Again, same thing. So they the cause of the massacre was the retreat. Elsewhere it says, the Jewish people ran away from the Pelishtim, and they massacred them. Okay. So this is, now we saw that all these exemptions. All these exemptions are true, but Medvar and Worm, when are they true? But Mechemes Harashos, in a war that isn't necessary to be fought. Okay, so I don't want to get too political here, but there are wars that one has to fight. Obviously, war of self-defense, you're obviously going to have to fight. If God tells you to conquer the land, that's a war that you need to fight. However, there are wars that are not necessary, and we'll have to explore the different types of wars. We'll get to that in a few minutes. Okay, so there's Melchemes Rishos, a war that you don't need to fight. Melchemes Mitzvah, a war that you're commanded to fight. I call Yotzin. Everybody holds you need to go out to battle. Everyone goes to battle. Even if the Chassan and the Kala are in their wedding hall, they have the ability to be drafted. Rabbi Yehudah says, this is true only with a war of a mitzvah, of a Melchemes Chayva. In other words, in a war of a mitzvah, in that situation, people are exempted from battle. In other words, the chassan, the groom, and the guy who built the house, etc. Av Melchemes Chayva, but a war that's an obligation. If the battle is you're obligated to go out to battle, so then everybody needs to participate, including a groom.
The bride also?
So that's a good question. Technically, so the bride, it could be for logistics, not for combat. Or it could be that the bride isn't actually going out to battle. It's that even though she is they're in the bridal room together, they can still take him. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Gemara 44b. My ikka bein Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yosef Lili. What's the difference of opinion between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yosef Lili? Eke beinayu avera d'Rabbanan, a rabbinical sin. In other words, according to Rabbi Yosef Lili, any sin, even rabbinical. And according to Rabbi Yossi, only a biblical sin. What's an example of a biblical sin? A basic level law of a prohibited relationship. So we're not talking about carnal prohibited relationships that are. We're talking about a prohibited relationship like a Yisrael marrying a mamzer or a Kayan marrying a Grusha, a divorcee. So the Gemara says, "Kaman Azlah Hadatanya." We have a brisa. Which opinion is this like? What does the brisa say? Soch ben tefillah l'tefillah. If he spoke between putting on his tefillin shel yad and his tefillin shel rosh, so then avera he biyadai v'chayzer ala me'archem mechama. This is enough of an excuse to leave the battle group. So whose opinion is this? Come on, Rabbi Yosef Lili. Clearly, this is a rabbinical violation. This would be the opinion of Rabbi Yosef Lili. Who is the author of the following opinion? We learned Shama kol kronos v'hertia. He hears the sounds of the horns, of the trumpets, and he loses bowel control. Hagafas treisen v'hertia. He hears the banging of the shields, and he loses his bowel control. Tzich charovas umayim shaisen lo'alvirkov. He hears the banging of the swords, and he immediately relieves himself. Chayzer, all these type of people, they leave the battle. Come on, which opinion is this? Lema Rabbi Kiva here. This is the opinion of Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva says that Yorev Arachalev, somebody with a weak heart, means somebody with a weak heart. It means exactly as it's written. This is a person who's clearly not able to withstand the vicissitudes of combat, and therefore they are exempt from combat. So whose opinion is this like? It seems like Rabbi Kiva. Lame Rabbi Kiva, the lower Rabbi Yosef Lili, and not the opinion of Rabbi Yosef Lili. The Gemara says no. Rabbi Yosef Lili agrees to Rabbi Kiva's definition as well, that somebody with a weak heart also is not sent to combat. And why is this? Because the pasuk says, "V'layimas es lavav ochiv kavavai," and his heart should not melt the hearts of the hearts of his brothers should not melt like his heart. So as if we have somebody that literally has a weak heart, even according to Rabbi Yosef Lili, they are excluded from combat. When the 1 second. Okay, so we're talking here about this idea that retreat that the cause of retreat is massacre. The Gemara says, the opposite's true. The cause of massacre is retreat. The Gemara says you're right. And all the verses cited all indicate that first there was retreat was the cause of the massacre. First there was a retreat, then there was a massacre. So Gemara says you're right. The cause of massacre is retreat. And that's why they would not allow retreat unless an order was given. But when is this true? Milchemes Harishos, in a voluntary war. Oh, okay, so we have this debate between Rabbi Yehudah and the Rabbanon, right? The rabbis differentiate between Rishus and Mitzvah, and Rabbi Yehudah differentiates between Mitzvah and Chayva. So you think of Rishus as something Rishus means something that's permitted, or you could do it or you don't have to do it. Then you have a Mitzvah, that's a positive commandment. You have Rishus and Mitzvah, and then you have Chayva. Chayva is an absolute obligation. Says Rabbi Yechanan, there's actually no debate here. The rabbis say Rishus has exemption, Mitzvah does not have exemption. And what the rabbis call Mitzvah, Rabbi Yehudah actually calls Rishus. I'm sorry, Rabbi Yehudah actually calls Chayva, obligatory. And what the rabbis call Rishus, Rabbi Yehudah calls Mitzvah. So there's actually no debate. It's just a question of how the terminology that should be used. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yechanan. Rishus permission is Rishus D'Rabbanan, the war that you're allowed to go to but not obligated to go to, of the rabbis, Zui Mitzvah de Rabbi Yehudah. That's the same as the one that Rabbi Yehudah holds is actually a mitzvah. Mitzvah D'Rabbanan, Zui Chayva. The mitzvah of the rabbis, that is the obligation to Rabbi Yehudah. So there's no debate. So Rava tries to give some definitions here. Rava says, the war of Yeshua to conquer the land, that was an obligation. King David fought wars simply to acquire wealth. That's clearly a volunteer war. You do not have to fight that war. Okay. What's the debate? The debate is with regard to fighting wars against, these are what do you call these? These are like foreign interest wars. So you feel threatened by a specific country, so you attack that country to prevent a war in the future. A preemptive strike. There you are. A preemptive war. Marakari mitzvah, marakari rishus. There's a debate whether that is titled a mitzvah or rishus. In other words, according to it's clearly not a obligation to go to, and there clearly are exemptions handed out for such a battle. However, the question is what's the title? Is the title of such a war is the title of such a war a war that is a commandment to do, or is it just a war that you're permitted to do? What's the difference how we title the war? The answer is according to Rabbi Yehudah, not only are the classical exemptions handed out, but actually exemptions are handed out to anybody who's involved in mitzvah. Sort of you work for a non-for-profit, or you're a part of you're learning in the yeshiva, you're given an exemption. That's sort of the idea. Anyone who's involved in a mitzvah is exempt.
Point of request for clarification. There's being involved in a non-profit is such being a part of one.
True.
Being involved.
True. True. So obviously it'd be a task that is directly mitzvah related, not just an administrative service.
Does that be going on right at the moment of the war, or is it just that
presumably somebody whose entire involvement is in the performance of a mitzvah would be exempt, even if at that specific moment he's eating supper.
If you go into exemptions, there won't be anybody but the
correct.
Correct. Chiefs of staff talking to.
No. Well, this is a war that's sort of the voluntary war. This is not a war that needs to be fought, and therefore you're right. There will be a smaller army available. Once now we're finishing the discussion of war. If there's a famous joke, there was a group of maskilim, the enlightened Jews that weren't so did not appreciate the Torah, and they put on a skit, and they get to the skit is they have 100 people in the room, and the general says and a couple people walk off the stage, and it says and a few people walk off, and it says and a few people walk off the stage. Then it says, and everyone walks off, except for 3 people left. One of them is dressed like the Chavetz Chaim, the other one is dressed like our Yitzchak Khan Inspector, and the third one is dressed like from Vilna, Reb Issa Zalman Meltzer, not Reb Salman. I can't remember his name. Chaim Isaac Gruzensky. There we are. And then they give them a gun, and they say, well, how does this thing work? So they apparently the joke was said over to one of the Litvisher Rosh Yeshiva, I think it was the Brisker Rav. He says, they didn't say the end of the story. They went out to battle and they won the war. Okay. Anyway, next. Now you get to Egla Arufa. Egla Arufa is where we'll learn the specifics, but Egla Arufa basically is where a deceased a corpse is found between 2 towns, and then a ritual is performed involving taking a young animal. We'll get to it, and it's split in half, and words are pronounced. We'll get to all the specifics soon. Okay. The statement of Egla Arufa is B'lashon HaKodesh. It needs to be spoken in Hebrew, Shenemar, as the pasuk says. Okay, now this is the wrong pasuk. We'll see. We'll get to it in the Gemara probably tomorrow. Okay, now the Gemara describes what is the Egla Arufa. What's the process? Ki motzei chol ba'adama. If you find a corpse on the land, the yotzu zekenecha v'sheftecha, the zekenim and the shoftim. Okay, the elders and the judges, they would leave. How many? Shloisha, 3 of them. They needed to come from the High Court of Jerusalem. The High Court of Jerusalem was a court that had 71 rabbis in it. Now, just to get you up to date here, very quickly, a typical court for rabbinical matters is 3. A typical court to be able to execute people is 23. And a court, the court that would resolve any debate, sort of the Supreme Court, was a court of 71. Okay, and plus I think there was an equal amount of what we call today clerks or interns. The court actually was set up. They set up like a horseshoe, 71 people in a horseshoe shape, and then there were 3 rows. I believe they had 71 people as well, and if any of those 71 retired, resigned, or died, one of the people from the bench would move forward. And that's sort of how it would cycle. Okay, anyway. Okay, so three of these of the highest court would come. Rabbi Yehudah says, Chamisha, 5 of them. Shnemar, Zekinecha Shnayim, Vishatecha Shnayim. The Mez and Shakom, Asifan Alei and Oidecha. Zekinecha is plural, Shaiftim is plural. And so you have 4, and you can't have a bezin that's equal, so you need to add 1 to be able to be decisive, an odd number, and therefore you have 5. Nimsa Tomim Begal Atoli Be'ilan. If we find the corpse hanging, hidden underneath a rock or hanging from a tree, itself a panamai, or floating on the river, orphan, they would not do egla rufa. Shenamar, as the verse states, ba'adama in the ground, v'loy toman, and not hidden. It has to be visible. Neifel, it fell, v'loy toli be'ilan, but and not hanging from a tree. Besoda in a field, v'loy tzav panamai, and not floating on a river. Nimtza samach l'svar, if they found the body near a border, or next to a city that's majority non-Jewish, or to a city that does not have a court. Loy hayu orphan, they would not do the process of egla rufa. Ein maidin, the measuring process would be el sheyesh bezdin, only to a city that has a bezdin. We'll stop here. Okay. Shabbos. See you tomorrow. Lots to cover.
They were talking with the ranking of armies as far as hanging soldiers.
So
That would be good.
what do you mean?
Well, you know, how the king wants to conquer some lands and pay soldiers to go fight there.
I think technically speaking, a king is allowed to draft without paying them, other than obviously giving them basic necessities to live on. Yeah. Matter of fact, Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, when he built the temple, he sort of did a draft. So you think of this more like a National Guard service. And the service, what was the service? The service was to work for 2 months effectively. So it's like a civilian Corps of Engineer or something like that. You know, so and you weren't paid. So in other words, every person had to take 2 months out of their year to go participate as a laborer.
Cut down Caesars.